All right, let's get started. So, hello everyone. My name is Brian Carrier. We're here today to talk about the 3.8 release of Cyber Triage. Um, as you can tell, everyone here, I believe, is muted or should be muted. If you have any questions, though, plug them in at any time into the Q&A section of the control panel thing that you should have. And either I or myself from the Cyber Triage team will pop in there and address those questions. If you've been these before, this is basically the basic process here. We want to go through and make everyone, aware, right, of kind of what's in the latest releases. Basic flow here is we're gonna give you an overview of two new features, right? You may be thinking, Brian, I just saw you like a month and a half ago, and you did. 3.7 didn't come out that long ago. But 3.8 was kind of a very tactical release here to get kind of two themes in. The malware scan levels, which has been kind of an increasing amount of questions and kind of concerns over what happens to people with their limits. We want to have a fairly focused release on that, and doing some things around Autopsy and Cyber Triage. So today's is all going to be about slides. I think every time we've done this, we've kind of alternated between like all slides, all demo, combination of the two. This one's going to be all slides just because in some ways, some of the these things are kind of all over the place, so more screenshot based. Again, anytime you have questions, the whole point of doing this versus the blog is basically allowing you guys to ask questions and clarify things. So plug them into the Q&A section here, and if that's not working, honestly, I think I have the power to unmute you, and we can just have a discussion here and clarify some things if that's the way. So let us go on. So theme number one is malware scan limits, right? So as you all probably know, since I think everyone here is a Cyber Triage customer, every Cyber Triage license comes with a fixed limit on the number of malware lookups and uploads, right? And the reason for that is because that we as Cyber Triage, buy access to some of these services. They give us limits, and we want to make sure that all of you have equal opportunity on those limits, and we don't want some person, one of our customers who I'm sure is having a very bad day, right, and has a whole bunch of bad things going on, but we don't want them as part of their really bad day to always be kind of taking over everyone else's limits, and then everyone is kind of stuck. So there are some kind of throttling that we have going on here to kind of make everything equal for people, with this. And our intention is that the licenses come with levels and quantities that are good for kind of everyday average use case things. So for example, Standard Pro comes with 4,000 hashed lookups per day. Standard comes with 5,000 per week. Team is Standard Pro, but it gets merged together. So the problem though is that sometimes you've got Standard Pro with 4,000 lookups a day, but you need 4,100 or 4,200 or 4,500. Not too much over, but you really want to get through that host and analyze that, and you didn't get to finish, and you're left wondering what was in those other 200 files that didn't get uploaded. Or maybe you've got a really bad week and a really bad incident, and you need another 12,000 for that day, and you're over your 4,000 limit or whatever it is. So our main goal is we don't want you to be high and dry on any given day with malware scanning, right? So we want to make sure that you have the ability 24/7 to get through those hosts that you have, but also being kind of fair and equal for all the fellow Cyber Triage customers, and kind of balancing that out. So here's what we did in 3.8 to address these concerns and issues that were kind of coming up with some people. So there's now a concept called flex levels, and flex levels enable you, the main goal of these is to enable you to finish the host you started. So if you started that host and you're going through this, we don't want you to get that message of like, sorry, you're out, and you're left wondering of, God, man, I wish I could have finished that. So this is basically the idea of you need that extra 100 for the day or 200 for the day just to kind of finish that up so you can kind of fully analyze that host and move on with that. We also introduced boost codes, and boost codes are a basic way that you can add surge capacity to your limits for a really bad busy week, and you can go way over usual limits. So in this case, you may need 20,000 more lookups for that day or the week or whatever, but you just need to kind of bring in a bunch for that 1 week, and you may not need that again, right, for another 3 months. But basically, every now and then, you may have some really bursty usage, and we want to make sure you can get through all your hosts. So the flex concept is introduced in Cyber Triage 3.8. This is a free included with your license. So this is basically now your licenses have what we're calling the base levels, which is the 4,000 per day or 5,000 per week, and then there's flex, and flex is 1,000 extra per calendar month. And the idea here is that you'll dip into it every now and then. So if you need that 100 extra today, you'll dip into that 1,000 with that 100 today, and then next week maybe you need 50, you'll dive into 50. Next week maybe you need 200, you'll dive in by 200. But the idea is it gives you that little extra you need just to get yourself over the finish line, and you'll dip into it over the course of a month. The boost codes you have to buy extra for. Again, these are big numbers of quantities of lookups you're looking for. But we have a website set up. There's a URL in here. You can find our website. There's links to it from the Cyber Triage app itself. And these are 24/7 credit card based purchase. So at 2 in the morning, if you run out, you can go there, plug in a credit card, it emails you back a code, and you can plug that in, and you can keep on ripping through your hosts to get through all that stuff. You don't have to work with a salesperson and get quotes and all that kind of stuff back and forth. It's entirely up to you to be able to order these things by credit card. So that's the idea. Let's look at this a little bit more. So how all these tiers work. It's honestly kind of a bit more confusing but flexible. But I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page in terms of how we're using these three things. So first, as you're going through your hosts, you'll go through what we're calling the licensed base, right? So these are the 4,000 lookups per day or 5,000 per week, or all the equivalent upload numbers. You'll first work through those, right? Those are kind of the ones you've already paid for. You've already paid from as part of your license. If you run out of those, it'll next see if you have any boost codes that have been added onto your system. So if there are, it'll then kind of go into those extra surge beyond your base. So even if yesterday you used some boost codes, but you're on standard pro that resets every day, the next day you'll go back into your license base and you'll start chipping away at that before you dive into your boost codes once again. If you have multiple boost codes on your system, it'll use the one that expires first. So they do have an expiration date on them. We'll talk about that in a second. So it's going to use the ones that expire first to burn those through those first, and then goes to the other ones after that. And then lastly, it'll go into this flex. So lastly, if you're all out of all your other resources, it's kind of that last ditch effort to get you over the finish line. That's where flex will kick in. So one key point here though is that flex is not simply 1,000 scans that we're adding to your license base, right? It's not just 1,000 things that we're adding in, like the 4,000 lookups per day or per month or whatever. So the idea is that flex is really just there to get you over the finish line. So it's kind of like an insurance, right? So you need to have some amount of boost or base on there to kind of start the host. If you have nothing, if you don't have base or boost, Cyber Triage will tell you, hey, there's nothing left here to start a malware analysis on this. You either wait till tomorrow or kind of buy a boost code. But even if you have flex available, that's really just there for that final push versus actually being able to start. You can view all these levels by going into the malware service status. This is on the host dashboard. There's a little link there. I think at the left column, for kind of your malware details, status details. So on the malware lookups tab is a table like this. And there, you can see 3 rows in here. So on the right-hand side, you'll see license base, license flex, and boost. This is going to tell you when they'll next reset. So this screenshot was taken back in August here. This is saying that this is a daily reset on the base. This is a monthly reset on the flex, and this is the boost, basically saying that there was 5,000 lookups remaining on this boost license that was on here. So if you have questions about where you are with your levels, you can now see these, all 3 of them. And again, they are ordered here based on how they're used. So they're going to be ordered here on base first, then boost. Actually, that's wrong. I take that back. It is not ordered how they're used. But it's basically here on kind of base, and then boost, and then flex. A couple other notifications that are going to pop up now. So when you're adding a host, there's a new dialog here saying, hey, you've got less than 500 lookups remaining. Like that may not be enough to fully analyze this host. So before you start it and then get a message afterwards saying you ran out, right? We want to let you know, right? So you can either just go with this and wait for them to reset if they run out. You can go with them and purchase boost if you run it later, or you can be proactive and buy a boost code and plug it in here and go with that. So we're trying to make sure you're aware of low levels before you start something, just so you have that awareness and consciousness, before you plug that in. We'll see later on how to add boost. This is an example, like where you'll go to the site, enter credit card, they'll email you a code, and then you can plug that code in here and activate it, and it will work from there. So buying boost, this is the URL, cybertriage.com/boost-checkout. There's some links in this in the user manual, as well as the UIs, as well as on the Cyber Triage website. Although it's honestly not the easiest thing to find on the website, just because we didn't want to add a confusion of people. Most people on the website are there to maybe buy Cyber Triage for the first time. So it's there. You can find it from the malware page, but the purchase Cyber Triage is really more about licenses. This is more of kind of, you find links to this within the user manual or the application itself. But you'll get a page like this, which basically gives you kind of the rundown of what it is. You pick how many lookups you want to purchase as part of your boost. Pick them here, and then there's an Apple Pay, checkout, credit card, whatever you want to do, kind of for purchasing, and then the email will get sent to you. So the code you'll get by email looks something like this. So it's a bunch of randomish letters and numbers with some hyphens in there. You'll copy and paste that in, either to that dialog you saw before, or you can see here, this is the same screenshot we saw before where we displayed all of the quantities of the levels, and there's a button over here to add your boost code in, and you can plug that in and copy and paste it, and it will give you this row here, with your boost. Couple things on the boost, right? So the theory here is that they need to be used within 1 year of purchase. So this will, we may change this, relax this over time, but we really want to kind of, commit to some level on the infrastructure for this. So, I'm sure if you purchase them and don't use them, we can figure something out. We're pretty flexible, with that. But right now, there's kind of a notion in here that they should be used within 1 year of purchase. They need to be used once you import them. The idea is if they have like a 30-day lifespan, right? That you buy enough to use to get you through the next month, right? They're really intended to be purchased here for, I've got a surge case, it's gonna be a really busy week, and so they're kind of a short-lived or a month-long lived duration once you import them in. Only use on one machine. When you do add them in, it goes back to the server to kind of get all the details for that, and there's a registration as part of that. So, if you are in an environment where you may have 4 computers and 4 examiners that are going through a bunch of things, think through that you can only use the one code, on one system. So maybe you want to buy 4 smaller ones versus one massive one. If your theory was you could share it amongst all of those. The pricing is linear, right? So the pricing is the same whether you buy, there's no kind of discounted tiers the more you get or whatever. So there's no price differences if you buy kind of 4 smaller size boosts, versus one bigger one. Other caveat is that right now it is not working with the offline scanning, right? So if some of you use Cyber Triage in an offline environment and export hash values over the air gap, plug them into a website, get results, kind of bring them back again. Currently, the boost codes aren't that tightly linked with your actual license ID yet to know that that came from you and that you have boost codes. So we'll work on that. It just adds a little bit more difficulty to actually kind of associate these codes together, but we'll get there. It's just that as part of the first one of these, it's all focused right now on kind of the online version of that. So I guess the last slide. Oh, one more thing. So one people question have is like, how many do I actually need, right? This is kind of also a confusion that many of you may have had when you purchase Cyber Triage, of when we list out the number of lookups and uploads you get. You're like, I don't know what this means. Like, I've never thought about these kinds of things. I don't know what a good number is. So fully hear that. So right now in 3.8, under the general status tab, there's a new line here. It says average number of lookups per host. And this is basically now going to start calculating for you the average number of lookups you use, right? So in this case, in this screenshot, it's 927, right? Yours could be lower, could be higher. Every host is different. We certainly had some customers who, have gone through, needed 3,000 lookups, on a host because it was brand new, a whole bunch of unique executables. Some folks need like 200. It all depends. So anyway, the main point here is that when you get that prompt saying, hey, you've got less than 500, what do you want to do? You may want to look at this number every now and then just to kind of be like, oh, well, I usually use 927. So if I only have 500 left, I'm going to run out as part of this. Or maybe the dial comes up and says, hey, you've got 500. And you're like, hey, I only use 300. I'm probably good. So it's just there as kind of for context to give you some knowledge, some data to help you make decisions on proactively buy boost or wait and see what happens. So I believe that's the last malware tab. Oh, one more. I keep on killing myself here on one more. Another kind of thing to start tying in, since we've had, I think of the last webinar we had a couple questions about this as well, which was, what happens when you run out? Like, what happens when you run out and let's just say in this case, you're out of your base and you're out of your flex, and it doesn't actually go through. Well, what's going to happen is that you see the results for all the files that did get analyzed, but then Cyber Triage is going to want to finish it, and so now when you reopen that host, once your limits reset, on the daily or weekly limits after they reset, when you reopen that host, it's now going to prompt you to say, hey, this didn't finish before. You now have limits available. Do you want to do it? Then you can say go. Or for whatever reason that doesn't pop up, or you ignore it or whatever, you can now also go, this has always been there, but you can go to the malware details panel again and go to the current collection, and this button says resume analysis. And the text on this button actually changes. The text on this button it sometimes says rescan, which basically means start from scratch. Like, forget we ever did analysis and just kind of do a rescan from scratch. But if it's in that state where it didn't finish the first time, it says resume, and you can hit resume here, and it's going to go through, figure out what files were analyzed before, and then just focus on the ones that weren't analyzed before. We're bringing this more to the front in future releases as well, to kind of put it more in your face that, like, oh, by the way, host, this one over here didn't finish. So as you open Cyber Triage up, to kind of remind you that you should go back and make sure you finish that one as well. All right, that really was the last one on malware scanning. So plug your questions in. This is a couple here that have been added through. So let me go through these. So one question here is, what would be the approach for those who can't purchase with credit card? That's an excellent question. So we if this ever happens, right, I can't guarantee you that we're going to be able to do a 24/7 response with this, right? But kind of under the guise of usual, business hours for this, let us know, right? We can figure that out as we go through this. I mean, certainly we can do, kind of an invoicing, thing, whatever. I would say that we just need to figure some of that out, right? Namely because the numbers that we're talking here aren't necessarily crazy big. It's like $200 or $250, right? So the amount of kind of like overhead required to make invoices and get finance involved and all that kind of stuff, could be a bit, right? Just for that small size of purchase. So if you're in an environment that can't do that, maybe we can figure something out to kind of, proactively, buy some more in bulk, where it's like, we buy 5 codes just so we can kind of do one transaction for the year, but you can keep them around, right? And use them, since they expire after you import them, but you can keep them around, if you want to, as well. Related to that, we've also, have been thinking about kind of rolling these into actually kind of the purchase of Cyber Triage, right? That, if it's easier for procurement and whatever to do it just kind of all at once, of basically with a Cyber Triage license also buying, 2 boost codes, right? And they don't have to be crazy big, but along with your license, you would get 2 boost codes that you could plug in throughout the year when you need to, so you wouldn't have to kind of scramble and figure out kind of what those levels are, for that. So hopefully that answers your question. So there's a question here on kind of other strategies, I guess, for you're kind of mapping out limits, right? And instead of having them be per day, maybe per month, per whatever. It's a great question, honestly, and that is kind of a parallel conversation that we are having in terms of just simplifying things, in terms of actually making things more at a monthly level, honestly, or even weekly, versus kind of the daily of things. And so there's certainly a bunch of things that we're also looking at. Those require, I guess, more kind of bigger licensing infrastructure things. So we were able to kind of fairly quickly add in Flex and Boost without kind of significantly changing the current way that we're doing things. But I certainly think that I know there's discussions going on, right, in terms of actually moving more towards getting away from daily, especially, right, and moving at least towards weekly, but then even certainly monthly as kind of a bigger chunk to kind of be able to build things up for if you have very bursty use. And there's even been discussions on like licensing more based off of number of hosts versus number of scans. People tend to think more about number of hosts versus number of scans. The challenge we found with that is actually kind of defining what a host means, and trying to prevent abuse. Believe it or not, we have a lot of people who abuse our malware scanning service, kind of on the free tier or whatever. So this is unfortunately one of these things that we're always trying to kind of figure out, to kind of not make things complicated for all of the good, kind of people that are kind of trying to follow the rules, while also trying to kind of limit kind of abuses that people will try and take, of this. So I think we've talked about doing it by host, with the idea that, but the one challenge there is like, if you're importing a logical file set that's got like 15 files in it, that does not seem the same as importing, a host with 3,000 executables, right, in terms of like your quantities. So trying to also balance out that people use our software in different ways. And so for different people, a host means a different thing. So great question. And I think there's a lot of kind of things that we'll be trying to map out here in the next year to kind of, again, our goal is that we want to make you guys get through this, get through analysis and not be tied back, with these kind of limits, and not be worried, about these things. So, if you have specific, additional concerns based off what we're talking about here, or kind of like the idea a lot more of like monthly, whatever, let us know. Either add them in the comments here, or reach out afterwards to, to us and the customer success or whatever, and just kind of let us know what your thoughts are with that, because our goal is to, make life as easy as possible for you guys, in terms of your analysis. One of the question here was in terms of team, since I talked a lot about standard pro, and team. So team has no real changes, right? Team, each user in team gets aggregated together. So if you have like 2 users in a team, that server can do 4,000 lookups per day. Boost, if you add Boost to that system, it works across all users. So if you were to buy a bunch of Boost for that server, added in like, let's just say, I don't know what, 20,000 lookups for the month, that could be distributed amongst all users, on that team server. It's not tied to a user. So hopefully that answers that question. All right, I'm gonna move on, but plug in any other questions you have. Theme 2 of this release, Autopsy integrations. So there was 2 Cyber Triage Autopsy integrations that were recently announced. So for those who don't know, Autopsy is our, what I call, general purpose digital forensics tool. It's an open source tool. As general purpose, meaning you can use it for pretty much any kind of investigation, as long as you know where to look, what to parse, and what makes things interesting or relevant. It's not going to do the scoring as much. It's really more about like general, here's data, here, search it and view it, and find things that are relevant. So 2 things were recently announced in the past month, last week, I guess. One, Cyber Triage can open Autopsy can open Cyber Triage incidents now. And 2, Autopsy can query the Cyber Triage infrastructure for malware analysis and scanning. So we're going to focus on the import feature today. That's kind of more of the core part of what's used for current Cyber Triage customers. Next week, we're doing a similar webinar like this, but for the Autopsy release. And in that one, we'll talk more about the Autopsy malware scanning module. So the import feature. So basic scenario here is you collected data with Cyber Triage, you brought it in, you scored it, you analyzed, you used all the malware scanning things we talked about, all those kinds of things. You identify the big picture themes and timing, what's going on in the incident. And then you want to dive deeper into that data, right? Because maybe Cyber Triage doesn't have the capability you're looking for, but Autopsy does. Just because a side note, we always want to know what those capabilities are, because honestly, like as much as I like Autopsy, I really don't want to force you all to be jumping between tools. That's not efficient. So if there's capabilities you're looking for that Autopsy has, Cyber Triage doesn't, please let us know, because we always want to know if it's easier to honestly add that into Cyber Triage and still keep it like a triage kind of tool, or not, or it's just like that's way too deep dive. Yeah, go to Autopsy for that if you really want that. So the scenario here is that you realize you want to go into Autopsy. So what you're going to do is you're going to use, you're going to now make an Autopsy case folder from that data, and then open that case in Autopsy. And then from there, you can do full text searching, timeline analysis, hex analysis, all that kind of stuff. All the usual Autopsy features are now available to you with your Cyber Triage data. So how do you do this? So number one, you have to get a module into Autopsy. So out of the box, Autopsy does not really know about Cyber Triage, but Autopsy was designed to be an extensible, modular, flexible system, so you can plug in a Cyber Triage import module. You can get that from the Cyber Triage options panel. So there's this integrations tab now on the options panel in Cyber Triage. It has this Autopsy section. You click export plugin, and it's going to save an NBM, NetBeans module file to your drive. You then go into Autopsy and bring it in like any other third-party plugin module. You go to Tools, Plugins, choose Downloaded tab, and then select, choose Add Plugins and select that NBM file that came out of Cyber Triage and bring all that in. So that now Autopsy knows some of the infrastructure around Cyber Triage. If you really want to know, all that plugin knows how to do now is go to what we call the file repository in Cyber Triage. So Cyber Triage, as you may have noticed if you've poked around, in the app data folder has a folder called files, where it stores collected files named based off of, I think, MD5, maybe SHA, hash value, and they are, I think, gzipped and encoded and whatever, so that there's no malware lying around your system. But this infrastructure that you just plugged in there now allows Autopsy to know about that location and goes there to get content, from the system. So that's what that integration does. So that's the one-time setup, or TBD on how many times you have to do that. It may be that every Cyber Triage release you have to get a new version. We're leaving that a bit open, but certainly not for every case. That's more like at least right now, a one per release setup. And then when you want to export an incident, you go to the incident report section in Cyber Triage, and there's now this item here. You can export or make a report for all items into an Autopsy case. So you click that, you hit generate. It's going to prompt you for a folder. You give it a root folder name, and it's going to make an Autopsy case folder in there. So it's going to make a folder based off the incident name, make a .aut file, and a bunch of other kind of infrastructure that Autopsy needs to open up a system. But you may already know that Autopsy and Cyber Triage share the same database schema, right? So Cyber Triage, a year or so ago, maybe 2 years, we changed it to use the same database as Autopsy. So their infrastructure is different, right? Autopsy cares about like a .aut file and some other text files. Cyber Triage cares about other things. So right now we now maintain parallel kind of metadata about the cases or incidents, but it's the same kind of common data locations. And so we'll work on that as time goes on. But right now, what you're basically doing here is kind of making that parallel Autopsy case folder infrastructure, so that you can go into Autopsy and you say case open, you pick that folder that it created, and that plugin will allow you to say, hey, I know where that file is, and I'll give you the content, for that. So that's basically it. Kind of limitations for this. This is a work in progress, just to be clear. There's a lot of kind of ways that people want to do all these things together. We honestly just want to get the ball rolling. Right? We've had a lot of requests for this Autopsy Cyber Triage integration in the past. To be honest, it's been a bit vague in terms of what people really are looking for in that integration. So the best way to get more details, honestly, is to start putting stuff out there and get feedback, and we can find out what people want more of, or less of, or whatever. So for this first version of this, here's some kind of limitations, expectation setting for things. So it only works for Cyber Triage Standard and Standard Pro, not for Team, right? What's going on here is that Standard and Standard Pro are making SQLite databases, the same database format, and that Autopsy is then opening those same ones up. Autopsy has a different kind of database locking infrastructure and kind of integration and messaging than Cyber Triage does. So Team gets a little more dicey in terms of making sure that Cyber Triage knows that Autopsy has it open and vice versa, so that we can get locking and consistency with them. So there's that'll come, but that was just a harder lift, and the Standard Pro were the easier kind of first step in that progression. Keyword search is the one that was most commonly requested in Autopsy. So that is in this integration, right? So if you bring data in to Autopsy from Cyber Triage, you can re-ingest it. Excuse me. Sorry while I die here. You can re-index that that data with the keyword search module enabled and do that keyword searching. There's in Autopsy, there's a new inline keyword search feature, so you can do that with indexes as well. It's kind of another new feature. Timeline Autopsy, yes, it is there, but there's some caveats with that. There's another commonly requested thing that people like. Excuse me. Some of those capabilities. So two things. One, the Autopsy is going to rebuild a timeline. One of the inconsistencies right now is that Cyber Triage has its timeline infrastructure, Autopsy has its own timeline infrastructure. So to use the timeline in Autopsy, when you open it up, it needs to rebuild its own timeline infrastructure. So it'll wait for a while. I'm sorry. It needs to kind of reload and move data over. So after you add a data source in Cyber Triage, get an Autopsy, it's going to take a while to kind of move data over and rebuild that timeline up. So that's just kind of a caveat there. Second kind of caveat there is that the descriptions for the event as part of that rebuilding are honestly not quite as clear as they are in Cyber Triage. This is kind of where we need to, we're still doing incremental work here to kind of make more common elements of these things. So as part of the rebuilding, some of the descriptions for the events honestly aren't quite as good as they are in Cyber Triage, but we're getting there. And that's because Autopsy doesn't know about some of the data types that Cyber Triage makes. So it's treating things very generically. And in doing so, it's not quite as fine-tuned as it is in Cyber Triage, but we'll get there. If you bullet number 4 there is see Autopsy create data in Cyber Triage. So what this means is that if you make an incident in Cyber Triage, right, you export it, you open it up in Autopsy as a case. If you then kind of make new artifacts, new analysis results, add data sources in Autopsy, and then you go back and you open it back up in Cyber Triage, what's going to happen, right? So general goal is that Cyber Triage should not be falling over, right? And it doesn't, right? But you may not see everything in Cyber Triage that you made in Autopsy. And that's because there's some like data types, like for example, GPS coordinates, right? Cyber Triage has no capabilities or interest in GPS coordinates. So if you do some stuff in Autopsy and pull out some GPS coordinates, you're not going to see it in Autopsy or Cyber Triage. It's just not going to be displayed in there. So that's why I'm saying partial here, that some stuff you create in Autopsy will come over if you make notes or tags, and some of that stuff will come over, but not everything will. So we're working on that as well, just to kind of make that more clear about what comes over, or not. One cool feature though is in Cyber Triage, if you bring a disk image in, you don't actually get to see all files in Cyber Triage. Like even though you have access to full disk image, it's really doing the collection and the triage of that, and you only see a subset of the files from the disk image within Cyber Triage. If that disk image is still available when you bring in an Autopsy, it'll give you access to all those files. So it treats it as a full disk image. So your full text search or other things, you'll get all the file content in there. And the last one is, can you run Autopsy and Cyber Triage at the same time? And the answer is still no. This has been kind of a long-term kind of request from people. We certainly give better messages now that they're both running, and you should shut one of them down. There's two things behind the scenes here. One, they're both relying on the same kind of core infrastructure, and so they have some challenges to run together. But and we were going to address that as part of this, but with this case of Standard and Standard Pro and having a SQLite database, they both can't have that same database open at the same time. So it causes corruption, right? The SQLite wasn't designed for this. So you don't want to have both Autopsy and Cyber Triage having the same incident database open and doing things. That's going to cause problems. So for right now, right, shut down, jump to the other one, do some stuff, shut down, go back to the other one. As we move towards team with a Postgres database and get all of the locking and stuff figured out, this will all go away. But again, for the 3.8 incremental progress here, this is kind of the limitations of that. If you have specific things you really want to do an Autopsy from Cyber Triage, let us know. We can prioritize that if it's not in the current queue of things. Jump back here. Just quick note here, right? So the other integration, Autopsy 4.21 came out last week. It included a Cyber Triage malware scanning module. It is not a full Cyber Triage integration. It's just the malware scanning. The basic use case here is, you have a disk image from a law enforcement case or whatever, and you have the victim or the suspect system, and you're looking for backdoors, right? To kind of like, answer the questions like, oh, well, did someone else put the data here, or does someone else have backdoor access to that? You can then use the Cyber Triage malware scanning infrastructure to flag those kinds of things. So we'll cover that next week in the Autopsy release webinar. You can either type in that URL down there below, or just go to the autopsy.com and look under the blog section. But there's a 4.21 release there, and the webinar link, is in there. Plug your questions in for the malware scanning, or for the import. Actually, let's do that first. Plug those in. Let me scroll through. There was some questions here on the malware scanning. It's a question here on the Autopsy session. So yeah, the link is here. I know I asked this question, so I can at least send you this one as well directly, for that. But you should be able to find it on autopsy.com, and then there's like a blog menu item, and it should be the first one under the blog menu item. Question here on, does the CT license work in the Autopsy malware scanning one? So it's a separate license code for the Autopsy malware scanning things. So that's a separate capability, and so there's a different license code that you can get for that. And we'll cover that next week. But being a Cyber Triage customer does not automatically give access to the Autopsy module for malware scanning. It does for the import, just not the malware scanning. So, question on time frame for Autopsy teams. No, we don't, just to be perfectly honest. We are doing a bunch of planning the next couple of weeks here to kind of map out the next the roadmap for the next year. But certainly we can I can follow up with you just to kind of get some of your ideas and interest on the capabilities you want. With that, because honestly, it's the main challenge here is really on the this kind of locking-ish kind of infrastructure and things, which, without getting too far in the weeds, like uses a lot of kind of what we call zookeeper infrastructure in Autopsy, and then creates more of kind of a setup requirements for Cyber Triage team in order to kind of get that same capability in there. So trying to weigh that out here in terms of what becomes kind of standard as part of team versus just if you want the Autopsy integrations. All right, but I can follow up with you as well. All right, so what's coming up? So 3.9 is coming out in November. There's a bunch of kind of other smallerish kind of stuff and all these things, of course. But the main thing here is incident level things, right? So we've been getting this kind of a bunch of these discussions for a while, but the main theme here is incident level focus, right? So there's a new sequence of opening dialogues as you start up to give more incident level, focus. We're adding in incident level search. So this has been a request for a while on usually around IOCs, right? Like, hey, I have a new IOC. I want to know is it anywhere in this incident. So being able to offer that. Although we were having some discussions yesterday with someone who was like, no, I also want I want to see all logins for this incident in a given time frame, or I want to see all processes in a time frame. So we're really kind of trying to map out kind of what people want to search for at that incident level besides IOCs as well. Incident level timeline. This has been kind of another kind of request, but it's always been generic. And so we're really kind of diving into the details. So if you've been requesting incident level timeline, or kind of even if you haven't officially requested but you would like it, we'd love to hear from you on this, just because we've gotten, I think, 4 different ideas on what incident level timeline means to various people. So we always want to make sure we're building the right thing. And so it'd be love to kind of get, kind of prioritize all these things to figure out which of the 4 is most interesting for you. For those who wonder what those 4 are, before we're running out of time here, just to kind of to see the water here a little bit. One definition that people have incident level timeline is very much like on a reporting level, and wanting to see, at the incident level for all of the hosts, and just the bad and suspicious items. So being able to kind of not see the unscored things, just focus on high level, this has got bad, this has got suspicious, this is bad, suspicious, and it allows you to visually kind of piece together activity across all of the hosts. But at that point, it's used more for reporting and for maybe prioritization, for like, ooh, this host has got a bunch of here at the beginning of the sequence, the end of the sequence. I'm gonna look there next, and diving into that, but using time as a prioritization element. So that's one. That's 2. It's prioritization reporting. Use case 3 is we've talked about is being able to kind of actually see raw events. Like, I want to see all of the events across all hosts in this time frame, all in one, and with whatever filters are applied there. That to me is a lot of data overload concerns that we're trying to figure out in terms of the best ways to display that, and what people are actually looking for. But it's just sort of some people want, right? It's kind of like, I've got a 3-hour window. I want to see everything across all hosts, right, of just processes or just logons or just whatever, to kind of do that. So we're working on that. And the 4th one is bringing in incident level data into the host view. So you're in a host level timeline and you're looking at activity on one given host, about being able to bring in incident level context on like the bad items and suspicious items from other hosts, just so that you have that for context as you're going through the current host you're looking at. So that's less about really the incident level timeline, but more about getting incident level context into the host level timeline. So these are all 4 legit good use cases. We'll probably get all 4 at some point, as part of these into the system. But right now, trying to figure out kind of which one to build first and second and third, to make sure that we are delivering as soon as possible on stuff to help you on your cases off the bat. So again, would love to get either kind of feedback in the Q&A section here on which of those 4 you really want the most, that it's going to help you tomorrow. Or again, send me emails, send messages of support, customer success. One of those emails, it'll eventually make its way around as well, in terms of like what you are really looking for incident level timeline. That seems to be the biggest request, and also the biggest ambiguity in terms of what people mean by it. Integrations are also in 3.9. We've done one with DFI or Iris. This is like a ticketing system that people are using. So with this integration, it allows Cyber Triage to kind of update the ticket, with kind of the results for that. So we're working on that. Some other ticketing ones will be coming down the queue as well, like Jira, ServiceNow, etc. And then we're doing some EDR integrations as well, in terms of kicking off collections and queuing back and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's on the 3.9 docket as well. So again, plug in questions you have. I'll circle back to them in a second here. After the webinar, if you have any questions, support is probably the best way to make sure that they actually get addressed. Bob is fantastic in support, making sure that things don't get dropped as part of that. So that's the best place to send them to, and then we can funnel them from there to other folks. So with that, let me circle back on any other questions that have not been addressed here. A few. So the question here on correlating with MO365 alerts to create a case or an alert in Cyber Triage. So I'll take my first stab at this. I'm not entirely sure I fully understand the question, but I'll take my first stab at this, and you can feel free to correct me here if I answer the wrong thing. So in the current form, the way most of our customers are using this is that whatever cloud app alerts they have, are going into some kind of SIM XDR-ish kind of capability, SOAR, and then start a collection off, with that, and doing the investigations, if there's an endpoint involved. What we want to do though is actually start querying these platforms more directly. So that what we want to be able to start doing is querying M365 or Salesforce or whatever based off of what we're seeing on a host. So if we're seeing a host and we see this person is hooked up with that infrastructure and the user account, Brian is involved with the attack, about being able to query these platforms to get more information from them about what Brian's activity was at any given time frame and pulling that back. So that's not in the app, but that's certainly kind of the direction we want to be going here, in the next, 6 months or year, right? Depending on kind of the platform, we'll be rolling these out. I don't know where M365 kind of fits into the queue of things, honestly, at this point. But that'd be the idea, is kind of being able to, take endpoint data and run with that. Our roadmap is not to be at this point kind of SIM level analytics of being kind of all the alerts going into our tool to then kind of do that, but really become more of a kind of investigation platform where you can kind of run with something and then pull in data from these other data silos as we go along. So I hope that kind of answers your question as part of that. Question here about ServiceNow in the queue. So it is. So we have Jira, ServiceNow, and I think that was it. Well, and SentinelOne. We had some customers who are using the SentinelOne alerting infrastructure as well. And so those are kind of the three that we have left in the docket to kind of update, with them. To get a bit in the weeds, the way that it's working for DFI Iris, which we just use as kind of an easy first one as well. We have customers using it, and B, it's open source, so it's easy for us to kind of poke around with it and play with it. So we made a URL infrastructure for reports. So now when you can add some data, it runs an analysis, it makes the HTML report, and then it will plug a URL on your Cyber Triage server into that ticket, so you can click on that and kind of be able to access that from wherever. So it kind of just makes it easy for the analyst or whoever who sees that ticket to kind of be able to pull up the Cyber Triage report, for that. So I will upvote ServiceNow based off of your question there. The question here about general question on does Cyber Triage recognize and process any virtual machines which may be found on a disk or an image? No. So Autopsy does this. Autopsy will look for VMDK files and such and extract them and then reprocess them back in as disk images. This is also where over time our definition of triage, it's been a bit fuzzy, but historically has been that the triage is more about kind of the live system as it was. And so we do support disk images, but it's usually more about kind of that live system that's running. And so in that case, it's more of a, if you knew that VM was important, about actually using that as the analysis versus more just really scouring for every little nook and cranny and corner for where there could be things. So that's really more of like an autopsy-ish, honestly, use case versus more of the historical triage one. So, but this is honestly where our definition of triage has been, honestly, not, I would say arbitrary, but it's flexible, right? It's kind of, everyone has their own definition of this. And the challenge being that we want to, by focusing triage things, we can keep the UI kind of more simplified, for things and faster, versus others. So again, would certainly love to hear more about, discuss this more, honestly, on kind of whether your use cases for that. And I guess if you would characterize it as like a triage use case versus honestly using Cyber Triage as more of like your deep dive tool, which some people are, because they really like the scoring, and they want to go deeper than it really is. And that's always one of our discussions, to figure out kind of how we enable that, right, and do both kind of the triage things as well as that deeper dive. So question here on EDR solutions. Current queue is Sentinel-1. I think we're playing with right now. CrowdStrike is in the queue, and those are the two in Windows Defender, right? So those are the three that we kind of have top of our list. And we have a PowerShell script that we were just kind of developing internally that we've shared with some of our customers to help kind of deploy the collection tool with that. Some EDRs provide even better ways of deploying it versus the PowerShell, but the theory is that PowerShell is going to work, pretty much anywhere. So that PowerShell exists, and we are looking to verify it works with all these other platforms, as well. And the next step is kind of like on the how do we query the EDR, right, to kind of leverage its data and knowledge as well, because there's a lot of good data in EDRs, and how do we kind of leverage that and build on top of that is kind of the next phase of the EDR integrations, but not for 3.9. So all right, any other questions? It's a question here I don't know how to parse, honestly, about Autopsy. I'm not sure it's a typo or some other typos in here, but I'm not sure how to parse this last one. So if you want to follow up afterwards, we can address that. But hope this was all useful. If you do have other things here, on things, that'd be great. And let us know, especially on timeline stuff. This is as we speak right now, we are mapping out kind of what the incident timeline scope is for 3.9. So if you do have kind of a lot of strong opinions on what you've been looking for incident timeline and such, please reach out. We'd love to hear you, just we can prioritize that amongst those 4 different things around incident timelines that we spoke about before. So appreciate your time, and let us know what else we can do for you. But we will talk to you later, I guess.